Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. And for those of you that some of the information is new, you hopefully understand now why someone that had never made a film thought, I need to make a film on this information, because I was just shocked by what I had found and very concerned at how organized and how just detailed they had been at just dismantling our culture and our wonderful country. So anyway, if there's any questions now, we can do that for a little bit, some questions and answers, and then we can go out front. Yes?
I noticed that George Soros was not mentioned. How come?
He's on the chart that's in there, that chart that unravels, but there were so many people and groups, you simply don't have time. There was so much stuff that I had, I just tried to just stick with as many just the specific things as possible, but he's actually one of the things on that chart going up. He was one of those groups on there. Yes? It took us about 22 months, so just under full-time. Didn't quit my job. We used our savings to live off of doing it. We knew this needed to be done. This was very important, and I thought, what's the least I can do for my country with all the great sacrifices that have been made? If I have to use my savings to do something, it's nothing compared to giving my life, or I have 6 sons, or them having to give their lives or whatever, so that's why we did it.
I noticed that Jim Bauer, the Reverend, was he here?
That Dr. Jim Bowers, that's my father, yes. And he's been involved in this since Barry Goldwater's campaign, which I know is what got a lot of you involved back in the 60s.
Curtis, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Okay.
Has the film since it's come out, have you seen an impact? Has it made an impact?
I think so. It is. He asked about the film. Does it seem like it's making an impact? And yes, I have been to Tea Party groups and churches and conservative conferences and Christian conferences all over the country for the last year, and we've had audiences from 50 to 1,200 come out to see it, and it seems to be shaking people up in a good way. My point wasn't just to paint a bad picture, it was to go, hey, things are serious and I need to get involved. I was hoping it would motivate people to go, I need to get involved in what's going on. It's crazy. I'm just sitting here enjoying America as it's disintegrating. It's like being on the Titanic. It's going down and you're still listening to the music on the deck instead of, helping people get on the lifeboats or whatever. So it's, so it does. We are very thankful for through the grassroots efforts of thousands of people across the country, buying 5 at a time or 10 and then sharing it in their circle of influence and getting it to their pastors and then showing it for their churches and like that. It's just been working its way across the country. My family and I were getting ready to leave at the 1st of March, and we're going to be in 35 states in 6 months all together. We bought a used RV and we're heading, and we have events set up in 35 different states, showings and question and answer times and stuff just before the election, trying to get it out to as many places as we can. And that's what I did this whole year too, and it seems to be being very well received. Yes?
I would wonder if you have a website where maybe you have those destinations, because many of us might have family or acquaintances in those areas we could encourage. And then the other question I have is, I noticed that the prayer breakfast in Boise is going to be March 3rd, and that David Barton from the Wall Builders will be the speaker there. And I'm wondering if you have tried to contact him or had any direction that way.
Yes, thank you. I think you could hear her question. Ronley has a nice voice there that we can hear. She's used to talking to crowds. First thing, yes, I will probably need to put that on our website of where we'll be and where we're going, and we're just making a circle around the entire United States almost. So I will try to do that. It should be on our website. So if you went to that, and you could let family and friends know in Texas or Tennessee or Florida or wherever we'll be, that would be great. The other thing, Dave Bard, yes, interestingly, again, as it's worked its way through the grassroots, just about 5 weeks ago, a nice elder lady was ordering from Texas, and her name was something Barton, I didn't remember. And she joked, I jokingly said, you wouldn't happen to be David Barr's mother? And she goes, yes, I am, and one of these is for him. She bought 10 of them, and she was giving them to all her friends and stuff too. So he at least gotten it. I'd sent him one before too, but a lot of times, a lot of those people, they get so much stuff. Their staff throws stuff out before they even see it. I've sent it out to so many people I never heard back from, and I know it wasn't, they didn't like it. I knew they were the type of people that would definitely have appreciated the message, but they probably never even got it because, again, it gets weeded out. They get sent so much stuff they don't have time for.
Yes, Curtis, it seems like what they're doing is, if not illegal, it's certainly unconstitutional. Have you started any movement investigating what can be done from that side? Because from their side, they're defeating Christianity primarily through the judicial system.
Right. He was just asking, is there what they're doing, it doesn't even seem legal the way they're doing what they're doing, but I think the problem is the judicial system. They have been able to use that to change the rules over the last 40, 50 years since 1962 when they took prayer out of the schools. And so it's tough. We have the Constitution and things on our side, and we have the authority of us as a people. Parents should be able to go to that public school and say, you're not teaching this to my children, and they should have to listen to that. But of course they do not. They do not want you in the schools. They always complain, oh, if parents were more involved, it'd be easier to teach your kids. They do not. That's that lie. They do not want you involved. If you came down there and started getting involved, they would ask you kindly to leave. So that is, I've seen that myself. Families we know that, yes, they would not put up with it for 1 second. So, again, so it's a tough battle because of that. I mean, what they are doing is totally treasonous. It is totally undermining the foundations of our country and twisting and using the freedoms we have to dismantle our own Constitution and stuff. So it's not good, that's for sure.
What is your website?
Our website is agendadocumentary.com, agendadocumentary.com. And if you have we have some cards out on our table, and also if you have one of the DVDs, it's on the back of that as well, right on there. So you can see that, agendadocumentary.com.
How are you funding your tour?
Just through the sales of the DVD and stuff. That's what we're living on right now. I've been doing this full time because I think it's important. To make something's one thing, but if people don't see it, there's no point in it. So we've been getting it out there. There have been, just this last year, over 1,000 showings like this in America, over 3 a day average. So all over the country, all 50 states. I've had many unique experiences. An older gentleman from Alaska called, probably 7, 8 months ago, and this is a fantastic film. I just wanted to thank you for making it, whatever. And his name happened to be Jim Palin, who was Todd Palin's father from Sarah Palin's stuff. So that's neat. I had a lady about 4 or 5 months ago call. She bought 50 copies and was just calling to say, boy, I thank you for making it. And she started talking on and on. It was Jenny Thomas, who's Clarence Thomas's wife, the Supreme Court Justice, and she then had her sister send her a copy. She loved it, invited me to Omaha, Nebraska, and Des Moines. And she'd set up all these events with hundreds and hundreds of people, were at every single one of them, and got a lot out through that. And so it's just growing, making its way sometimes into the people of influence. But if it's not even, if it just stays with us common people, that's fine. As long as each person's just spreading their circle of influence, it gets out there, and it can make a big difference, I believe.
To help enslave us even more. Furthermore, we have just recently passed the NDAA, which, believe it or not, is an official way of saying we declared martial law without declaring martial law. But
Oh yeah, no, this is what's funny. I finished this a year and a half ago and have been promoting it or whatever. But everything, the Occupy movement, everything that's been happening is just, it's like, wow, I didn't know I was going to be so right on top of things. My main concern when I started making this the summer of '08. Obama wasn't even president. None of this stuff was going on. And my main concern was, I go, if I even mention the word communism, they're going to go, what kind of crazy crackpot? Communism's dead. What is he talking about? That was my main concern. But by the time I finished 2 years later, the summer of 2010, everyone was talking about communism and stuff. And so that was neat to see that, again, it was just the right thing at the right time, and all this stuff going on. They're just furthering exactly what they've been doing since the 1930s, full on, and even before that. And they've gotten bolder because they see their numbers, the people that are dependent on the government, the people that are kind of enslaved in their system, and they know they have their vote. As that population rises, they're emboldened by that. And the very fact they got an Obama in there, they were more shocked than we were, okay, to get that they would be that successful this soon. And so that's why they threw Hillary under the bus instantly, because they thought she's going to be the candidate. This guy doesn't have a chance, but at least we'll get his name out there, so for the future we'll be able to get it. But when all of a sudden they saw people were actually dumbed down enough to vote for someone that has no experience in anything. Do you know he has never had a regular job in his entire life?
It's a community agitator.
Yeah, a community agitator and organizer, that's all he's ever done. He's never run a business, he's never had a payroll, he's never had employees, he's never worked for someone where he had responsibility to produce or to do something, ever. So my thing is, even if you took the beliefs completely out of the system, you go, I can't believe the Democratic Party put someone forward that wasn't capable of doing. He doesn't have the resume to be the assistant manager at Taco Bell, literally. I mean, that's not a joke. It's true. But he's president. He's the most powerful man in the world, and he is using that power to do this as quickly as he can through executive orders, through anything he can do. As he said just a few weeks ago, if this do nothing, Congress will do nothing, then I'll do it myself. That's scary, coming from someone like him.
Okay, since the subject has been broached, so this isn't really a question for you as much as it is for this group, since I haven't had direct involvement with the Tea Party. I'm highly supportive of most of what's gone on. But Montana has launched recall efforts for their senators, and I'm actually interested in pursuing same. It was mentioned during the course of the interviews that we need to hold our elected representatives accountable. And I was in touch with our Idaho senators, both of them with their office. Of course, they don't speak with little eons. I'm just a servant, but nevertheless, I did talk to their offices and voiced my concerns about the NDAA ahead of time. Then the amendments were provided, which would have stripped the most heinous of the elements from the NDAA, which would have stripped the elements which allow for the indefinite detainment of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. And no, they both of the senators from Idaho, wonderful folk that they are, voted against that. Those amendments went down 55 to 45, and both of our senators from Idaho voted against it. And they all but flipped me the bird when I called them. I called and told them that said, I voted for both of you. I voted for you, but you now have a vocal opponent in Idaho, and I will do what I can. See, they are not responsive to us. Please understand that the responses I got from those offices was that they are so confident that they will be reelected, that they can do whatever they wish with no consequences from home, because it's Idaho, and Idaho votes Republican. I don't care if they've got an elephant behind their name or not. They need to be held accountable. So I would be interested if there's any other interest from anyone else, or anyone knows further what can be pursued to begin a recall effort. I don't care if it's successful, simply to make the statement so that these people understand that they are still, at this point in time in the U.S., accountable to the people who voted them.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Ronna Lee Linzeman and Senator Pierce are two people that have been involved in the Republican Party for a long time, and two of the few real conservatives that are in there that are not scared to stand up for the truth, not say things that are right, regardless if they're popular or not. And so I would get advice from both of them, because Senator Pierce, I don't know if you remember when I was in there, I used to come talk to you sometimes, and I always appreciated, I could tell you were one of the few that had the courage to stand up for truth, and I know you've been doing that for years, and we appreciate that very much. That's what we need more than anything else, is men and women that will actually, once they are elected, do what they said they were going to do before they were elected, which is almost impossible nowadays. It's crazy, because we have the wrong type of person running to begin with. That was my big lesson for my little teeny stint in the legislature. I go, you know what? All nice guys, all talk the party line, and I think some of them believe it, but they're the wrong type of people to begin with, because they wouldn't stand up for anything. If their mother was drowning and it cost them a vote, they wouldn't save her. It's that bad, and I couldn't believe it. Nice guys that I would have lunch with, we would talk issues, and we were in line on everything. I wasn't like to the right of them. We were dead smack when we would talk, exact lined up on the issues. But then when you go, hey, why don't we try this? Ah, well, it's election year, why don't we do that next year? That kind of thing. And that's what has killed us, though, as a country. It just killed us. And what's killed us is we, the people, we don't bother to check how they vote on things, like our 2 senators. In the next election, I guarantee you they'll get 70–80% of the vote. I don't care who runs against them. Oh, Jim Risch or whoever, I know that name, and so they just vote for it. They don't go, well, how did he perform the last 6 years? Did he vote for what he said he would vote for or not, or whatever? So that's the thing. We get what we deserve, is the bottom line, because we are not holding them accountable. We're not doing what you just said, very rarely, where we're going, no, I don't like what you did, so I'm gonna shake the cage a little bit and make some noise. And maybe it'll pay off, maybe it won't, but I'm gonna let you know you are accountable to us. So, yes.
It was very interesting. We posted foreign exchange students several times, and one of our kids from 12 years ago came back and was just with us recently from Russia. And he was talking about it. He loved to immigrate here, and we were talking with him. We've been talking on the political stuff with him. And he says, you just don't understand. Even with the state that you have, it's so much better than where you're at. He talked about the corruptedness still in their system. Everything's bribes. You know, you get where you're going to go by bribing people and paying them off. But one of the things that he pointed out, and I thought was kind of interesting, is that you do not. And if you own property, you have to go back to the province where your property is in order to vote. So if you live in Moscow and you have property in Siberia, you have to somehow get back to Siberia in order to vote, which costs a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, that's, I mean, in America you used to have to own property to vote too. Where there's some, I think you should at least have to pay taxes. If you have not paid taxes, and that would be very motivating to the people that if you're coming up and you go, hey, you don't get a vote until you can show us a W-2 form where you've paid some taxes or whatever, that would be motivating, and they would make them part of the system. You can't have someone vote in a system they have no part in, especially when they're reaping the benefits of that system without contributing anything. That's crazy, but that's what we've created. Really, that's what the Democratic Party has created. They have just everything possible since good old LBJ was in there, they have done to expand programs to enslave people. And they have been incredibly successful. What they have done to the black community, in my opinion, is far more evil than what was done with slavery. Slavery was a clear wrong. You look and you go, hey, people should be owning each other. This slavery has invisible change and has destroyed their entire culture, their family structure, everything. But they've tricked them into believing that they're the ones that are trying to help them, and the Republicans or the conservatives are against them. And nothing could be further than the truth. It breaks my heart what has happened. Yes?
What's all the uproar over a voter ID card?
What's the uproar over the voter ID card?
I was hearing on the news there were suggested, and boy, I mean, there was all kinds of uproar from all the people that feed on the black people, you know, how it can be discriminatory to them and all that. I mean, like Jesse Jackson and Sharpton, you know, they think that's very racial, simply because we're short. Sure. I can understand that you don't want anybody to upset the apple cart, you know, where the Democrats got their foot on the black man's neck, you know. I can understand that because, you know, it gives them a lot of votes when they draw these little cookies of this giveaway program and that kind of way, you know, to get their vote.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty pathetic. I hope that for many years the black person hasn't actually seen that.
Well, it's just terrible. What's going on in that particular thing, you could spend a whole night talking about, but it's terrible. It is, they are just doing everything possible to destroy the family unit of the black people in this country. If you look back in the 50s and 60s, when they were not being treated like they should be in this country, and shame on us for that, we're reaping the consequences of that. But back then, they had the strongest family units in this country. Even when they weren't given the freedoms they should have had, they weren't being treated like they should have been, they had tight families. And the Democrats, as soon as all of a sudden they were starting to get these civil rights, they saw, wait a minute, the black man's going to be free, and that got them nervous because they were LBJ and some of them, they were racist. If you look at their records. And they said, okay, what can we do to capture them and get them on our team so then we don't care if they have some freedoms or not, they'll be ours. And they came up with these wonderful welfare programs that even the old Daniel Patrick Moynihan, I believe his name was, Senator, he warned even. He said, if you do this, it will destroy the black families in America. And they, of course, didn't listen to him. That was ahead of time, he warned them. And look what has happened. 80% of the black families in America don't have a father in the home. And we know what happens from statistics. When there's not a father and a role model in that home, the chance of a child being successful in life is almost nothing. And it's so sad. I mean, that to me is one of the issues that just, of anything going on, it breaks my heart, because they've been sold a bill of goods that is not true, and it's hard as a white person to try to make that right, because you come across as if you're against them, and you know you're not in your heart, but it's just tough. But there is definitely a lot of black gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen across this country. I know that have even contacted me about Agenda, that they see what's going on, and they're starting to rise up and communicate, and that's powerful. If we can get them to communicate to their people like that, that will be powerful, and I'm praying that will be successful and be able to start waking them up to what's going on, because that's a vital thing. Yes?
Curtis, I don't want to take full floor, but you've got to look at this as the big picture too, because we have been sold a bill of goods, even by the Republicans, George Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney. What I'm talking about is what's called, it's torture, it's waterboarding, it's rendition, it's all of these things that they'll do it to. Islamofascists is what they call them. They'll do it to you and I. If they bust down doors in Iraq and Fallujah or anywhere else, that is a practice run, folks, for what they plan to do right here and now. I'm telling you bluntly, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I'm going to tell you bluntly and clearly. You know, we were taught that you were to take your prisoners of war and treat them humanly. Not the way that we have been doing this. It is evil. Our Lord Jesus Christ bore himself on the cross. He willingly was tortured, and the Romans had it down to a fine art. And it's evil, and I'll say it to my dying day. And I tell you, it's what was said up here earlier about the fact that our Constitution is one that governs a moral people and none other. Well, I'm through.
Well, and that's why, but that's why I made the point in here that I think is a key point that we don't focus on enough. That's why morality matters. A lot of people think, oh, morality doesn't have, it's just a free enterprise system. No, that's why it's not working in Russia, because they're not immoral people. Immoral people are not going to buy and sell freely with each other. They're going to do the bribes, they're going to do whatever, because they're not immoral people. To have a prosperous and flourishing free enterprise system, you have to be a people that have character and virtue and are moral, and that's what makes a free enterprise system explode, just like it had the first almost 200 years of America, which had never done any other country, because they didn't have that foundation that we had. And now, as we see that eroding, and you see the big companies that will fudge their books so their executives can make more money, even though it's going to wreck the retirements of millions of Americans, they could care less. As long as I got my bonus, who cares? Well, that's why then people start to get scared to invest in the stock market, because how do I know, yeah, that company looked like it did good last year, but how do I know that? And that's what it makes government expand tremendously, because all of a sudden the people do what? They start asking the government, well, could you check all their books for us? Can you do? And they want them to start regulating everything so they know what is happening is true. You want them to, when you go to the market, you go, well, the government better check our food. What if that's not really whatever it's supposed to be? And that's what happens in a immoral society. People started getting away with everything they can get away with. They start, oh yeah, this is 100% true. You know, there's no lead paint in this toy or whatever, but there is, because they did whatever's the cheapest to make the most money. And we see that happening in China. They don't have the morality. Exactly. No, but that's why it all starts unraveling when you don't have the Judeo-Christian foundation. 50 years ago, the average man in this country, saved or lost, church-going or not church-going, governed his life for the most part by the Ten Commandments. It was just ingrained in us in society as a culture. From a young child on up, you were just taught, you do what's right because it's right. And that we've lost that, and that's not being taught in the schools anymore. And that's why, as these kids are coming out, they're buying into anything they're being taught in the universities. Even when history shows, wait a minute, that's all total lies. It doesn't work like they say, but they're buying into it anyway because they have no moral compass whatsoever.
Recently, there was a news article about, I don't remember, North and South Carolina in the 20s and 30s.
Yes.
Has that ever been linked to Planned Parenthood in the past?
Totally. It was all Margaret Sanger. No, it's been totally linked to her. The news isn't going to tell you that. Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood, by the way, still gives away the Maggie Award each year to the most wonderful person they think around. Margaret Sanger was a racist. She wanted to uproot the weeds of America, which were the black people, in her opinion. She says that in her own writings, her own book. She wanted to use genocide so the imbeciles and the misfits could not reproduce, which included the minorities and just the poor people, just sterilize them all. And her programs, this will blow you away when you study this. I didn't have time to put this in the film. Her programs, yes, did all those cases that they were talking about in the news recently, but also, this is mind-boggling. Adolf Hitler's, one of his top aides, was a student and corresponded letters back and forth with Margaret Sanger, and he gave her ideas to Hitler to use. It wasn't, she didn't get her stuff from Hitler. Hitler got his stuff from Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Those letters are public record. They're real letters going back and forth. And Hitler admired this lady in America that was starting eugenics and wanting to sterilize the poor and the imbeciles and the weaker races and all that stuff. So it's, Planned Parenthood is rotten to the core. Yes?
Larry kind of got me going here. I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan in the 60s, okay? So I don't know if you guys have ever lived through the 60s, but Kalamazoo was a hot place. I started junior college in 68. Junior college, hey, everybody was educated, but it was cheap. Everybody went to junior college. First things they taught, liberal arts. Okay, if you don't know about liberal arts, at least I had some morals from home. It was a good education, but I got into philosophy, got into kind of history that was kind of altered. The only thing that kept me going in history is my mother was from England and my dad and mom met during World War II. So I got some truth. I ended up going into kind of like social work, and then I got a degree in social justice. So I'm open proof of this, okay? The garbage that was taught was unreal. Believe it or not, I met my dear husband, who was with the Illinois State Police, in the social justice program. It was disguised as, let's get all these cops in here under the elite program, which the government was sending all these cops. I went to school with about 600 cops. And not one, but they were getting a bunch of stuff too. And I mean, all this is so true.
Yeah.
And I grew up. I accepted Christ and I grew up. And it was really neat. But when I look back at all the pollution, I have a sister who's 8 years younger than I am. And she's a radical in California. She's very liberal. We get together and sometimes it's not a good match. But just in my whole life and career and everything, people here, some of you have younger children, older children, grandchildren, work on your children. Show them what you have just seen. Encourage them to write a paper on it, but also tell them you might not get a good grade in school. This paper you might fail, but then turn around and write a liberal paper and see the grade.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a difference.
No, that's true.
And just work with your children, because that's gonna be the only
Or I'll teach your
salvation for us.
children well, or else he skills at that.
But work with the children.
And on that, there, what she was just saying, the stuff you were taught in the 60s, which was radical, that's all mainstream today. I guarantee and no matter what your major is, you're getting that in all the undergraduate courses. So every student is being propagandized the same way you were in a radical curriculum in a radical school back in the 60s.
I will say, I have a master's in psych, which I am a Christian and it does blend. But the class that I had back in the 60s, the psychology was classical conditioning. You don't know, look under classical conditioning, Pavlov's dogs, and it's just interesting how they've integrated that into raising your children.
Yeah.
Curtis, part of your presentation showed Russia with all the babies. And I actually had a friend that was almost 101, who passed away just recently. But he had told me how he and a small group of Americans had gone over to Russia when he was in his 20s. And they went to an institutionalized looking building, and that is exactly what he saw. He told me the details of it. And even though he was very elderly, he did all of his business up until the point he died. He was very cognitive, a brilliant man. And he said that is the way America is going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny on that too. I had an uncle that fought in World War II, was shot down over Germany, was captured by the Germans, was a prisoner of war under Hitler in World War II. And years later, he told us this story when I was a young man. He said, we got caught, and it was close, it was toward the end of the war, so he was only a prisoner for several months or so, but he'd gone down to like 90 pounds from about 200-pound man to about 90 pounds. And he said that they were all starved, even the soldiers themselves were starving to death because the machine of Hitler was falling apart. But he said, we were freed. We were allies back then with Russia, of course, in that war against Hitler. But he said when the Russian soldiers came in and freed us, he said, I knew right then, and this is back when we were still just, that they were going to make Hitler look like a joke. He said, I could see, even though I was so thankful for them to be freeing us, he knew he could see the hardness in their eyes and who they were when they came in even to help him, so they freed him. And he was thankful. But I remember years later he said, when all that stuff started happening in the Soviet Union, it didn't surprise me at all, because when I had seen those soldiers coming to free us, I was more scared of them than Hitler's Nazis. He goes, they just were like machines, dead eyes, just no conscience whatsoever, with that atheistic worldview. And anyway, it was interesting then, he saw them what unfolded in the Soviet Union during his life. He just died a couple years ago. And he said, that doesn't surprise me at all. I was in terror of their soldiers that were there to free me, because they were just different. They were like machines. Yes. Supposed to be, God instituted government among men for certain reasons, a very limited scope, but there are some reasons. And people say, oh, you can't legislate morality. That's the only thing you can legislate. Every law is morality. You're imposing on someone else. That's why it has to be very limited. But I believe when it was coming from a biblical perspective, like for drugs to be against the law, I do not have a problem with that being a law, but libertarians would. They would say, no, the government has no business telling you can't use drugs or whatever. So the fine line there is that I think most Americans line up more with a conservative worldview than a libertarian, but have been pushed into the libertarian camp because the people that are supposed to be conservative, the Republicans, so much of the time are not. So you're repelled away from that, so you go, I'm going to just be a libertarian because I'm fed up with all this nonsense, which is totally understandable. But I think morality does matter for there to be laws on things like drugs and crime and different things. I think there's no prostitution, things are destroying your own society. That is fine. In all American history, pornography was against the law. Those things, that was in the traditional limited government of our founding fathers. They didn't allow that kind of foolishness in their culture. They knew it would destroy it from the inside out. So I think we need to stand on a conservative founding fathers' platform, which would be for morality. They would be promoting morality as well. Because just like that quote in the movie said, the Constitution will not govern a people that are not moral. There has to be that morality, that fabric of morality. That's why our children should be being taught moral issues in school. Of course they should. They act like they're not being taught that, but they're taught the opposite. They're taught immorality is what is good and right and true. No one can tell you what to do. And then, of course, as a result of that, 50% of our kids have sexually transmitted diseases by the time they turn 20. 50%. They're going to carry that with them the rest of their life into their marriages, into their families. And a lot of these diseases nowadays, they're not like little games. Oh, it's no big deal. It's a huge deal. You have a big problem the rest of your lives. And the fact that those teachers lied to them, oh, there's no, do whatever you want, it's fine, if it feels good, do it. And then they're the ones that reap the consequences. Half these girls, not to get into all this, but they get chlamydia and all this stuff that is just skyrocketing, and millions of new cases every year. They're never going to have children either. It totally sterilizes you. And so they're going to all of a sudden wake up 20s, 30s, wanting to get married and have kids, and find out I can't. Oh, back when I was 16, my teacher said it was fine. I got these diseases, and now I can't even have children. And there's a high price to pay for going the wrong direction. There's a high price when we don't teach a high moral and standard of virtue and character and excellence in everything we do. And it is wrong for us, as parents and grandparents, to allow our children to be indoctrinated with that kind of garbage from 4 years old on without us standing up and saying, I'm sorry. Not on our watch. I don't care whether you drag me off to jail, you are not doing that in my schools, to my children, the neighborhood kids, and we're not putting up with it. You are not having sex ed classes in our schools. You have no right to do that. And we're going to come in and teach abstinence, at least show them, yes, you don't have to act like an animal. You can control yourself. Just like you can train a dog to obey, you can train a child to obey. And it's ridiculous. It's very sad what we've allowed to happen again. And the good old sexual revolution of the 60s, all it did is destroy so many lives and so many families, and so many women were lied to about being a homemaker would be the worst thing in the world. So they went off to get this career, and little did they know, by the time they turned around and realized, boy, this isn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be, it's too late to have kids. It's too late to find the right man. It's too late to do all the things that we can enjoy in our life if we do the right things in the right order. And so anyway, I want to thank you again for coming. I'll be out here and be happy to answer more questions if you have them, but I know some of you need to go. Okay, last question here.
How can we, do you have a suggestion how we can communicate to the young people that we should contact with? Because there's a lot of young people out there that maybe we can contact or have some influence over, and their parents aren't even aware of the information. And do you have any suggestions how we can help the younger generation to contact with these?
Okay, the question was, do you have any suggestions of how we can get the younger generation in touch with some of this information? A couple of things I can think of. One is there's Summit Ministries in Colorado Springs, Manitou Springs, Colorado. It's a 2-week leadership training program for high school and college-age students. 2 weeks. I did it myself 4 times when I was a teenager. It changed my life. Because it teaches you why you believe what you do and how you can back it up. And what it's for is preparing them when they go to college, so when they hear the college professor say all this stuff, they'll know, no, sorry, that's not right, and they'll know why it's not right. And they can back up and defend what they believe and why they believe it, which is so important. There's also good books like from them, like Understanding the Times is a book that you could get. I think in your churches, if you guys go to churches, you could start a group, or have some other people start a group, getting the young people coming over your house once a month or whatever. Watch some videos like this, talk about them, educate them, get to know them, whatever. I mean, there's so many great resources out there. There's tons of great books that they could go. You could go have a study group and go through it with them. And every single one you can reach makes a huge difference. It's one more life that's not going down the tubes and going to be going the wrong direction. And if they do wake up, it'll probably be after they've already wrecked a good portion of their life. That's what I see now. I bump into so many older people that are now coming on this side, but they just talk about the devastation of, because they bought into what the 60s was selling, and it just wrecked their whole life, and their families, their marriages, and everything else. So thanks again for coming. I'm going to stay up here for questions, but I'm going to let you guys go that need to go, and appreciate it.